The wind howled across the frozen plains. Snow fell like ashes from a dying sky. Kalira's legs trembled as she walked, arms wrapped tightly around the tiny bundle in her chest. Her baby, only days old, didn't cry anymore. It was too cold to cry, too cold to feel anything but pain. She had once been a proud warrior of the Viren race. Now she was nothing more than a shadow. Her clothes were torn and soaked from melted snow. Her boots had holes, and frostbite had started to eat her toes. But she didn't stop. Not until she found shelter. The endless white around her offered no help. The sun was gone, hidden behind black clouds for days. And behind her, somewhere far but always near, were the hunter drones, machines created to wipe out survivors like her. They had already taken her village, her friends, her mate. Now they wanted her child. Kalira saw a jagged crack in the side of a snowy hill. Cave small, narrow, but enough. She crawled inside, shaking her child clutched to her chest. Inside was dark and silent, better than the storm, better than death in the open. She sat down and pulled out the last dry fur she had. She wrapped the baby again, layer after layer. Then she held the child close and whispered soft songs from her homeworld. The baby didn't move, but Kalira could feel the slow breath against her collarbone. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I failed you." Her fingers searched her small pouch, finding the last 2 fire pellets. She struck them together and made a tiny fire in a ring of stones. The warmth was weak, but it lit the cave in a soft orange glow. She leaned over the baby, trying to cover him with her body. Her eyes were heavy, her arms numb. Kalira thought of her people, of green trees and purple skies, of laughter, music, and sunlight on the river, all gone. She thought of her mate, stabbed by a drone while trying to defend their home. His last words, "Run. Protect the child." She had run, and now, at the edge of her strength. Outside, the wind screamed louder. The wind screamed louder. The fire flickered low. Her child made a weak sound, then went still again. Kalira kissed his forehead. Her lips were blue, her breath slow. She closed her eyes. "If this is how it ends, let us sleep together," she whispered. "No more running, no more pain." Silence filled the cave. The fire turned to embers. Snow blew across the cave's entrance, and then crunch. A sound, soft but strange. Kalira didn't move, lost between sleep and death. But someone stepped closer, slow and careful. Boots. Not drone clicks, not metal, human. The man stood at the entrance. Dressed in dark survival gear, his face was hidden behind a frost-covered visor. He saw the woman and her child curled up like forgotten ghosts. Without a word, he stepped inside and checked the fire. Dead. He moved fast, pulling out a small heater from his pack. He placed it near them and wrapped his own coat around them both. He knelt, brushing the snow from her face. Still breathing, he muttered. He looked at the baby, touched his cheek, still warm but barely. The man opened his pack and pulled out food tubes. Water, bandages, a new thermal blanket. He worked quietly, focused. He didn't ask questions. He didn't care what species they were. They were alive, and that was enough. Kalira felt warmth again, real warmth. She blinked slowly, her eyes heavy, but she saw a Shapa man, a human. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. "Don't move," he said. Voice low and calm. "You're safe." Her eyes closed again. But this time, there was no fear, no goodbye, just sleep. The man sat at the entrance with his weapon ready. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside the cave, for the first time in many nights, the fire of life had not gone out. Kalira opened her eyes slowly. She expected the cold, the pain, the silence, but instead, she felt something soft on her body, something warm, a blanket. No, a jacket, large and heavy, not hers. The small fire beside her glowed steady and bright. Her baby was still in her arms, wrapped tighter now and warm. She gasped quietly and looked around the cave, and then she saw him, a human, tall, broad-shouldered. Sitting near the fire with his back against the cave wall, he wore black survival gear, thick gloves, and a mask pulled up to his nose. He didn't move. Was watching the fire, not her. Panic hit her for a moment. Was he a soldier? A hunter? She pulled the baby closer, her hand searching for a rock, a weapon. Anything, but the man lifted his hand slowly, showing he had no weapon aimed at her. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice calm. "I found you almost frozen, Kalira." Didn't answer, her lips were dry, her body weak, the warmth was helping, but she still didn't trust him. No one helped without reason. "Not anymore. Eat," the man said, tossing a small food pack toward her. It slid gently across the ground, stopping near her foot. She stared at it, then back at him. He didn't move, didn't push, just waited. She opened the pack with shaking. Hands and smelled something unfamiliar, but her stomach growled, and her body no longer cared. She ate slowly, watching him. Her baby made a soft noise, moving slightly, still alive, still breathing, good. The man whispered more to himself. Then to her, she paused, frowning. "You care for us," she said weakly, her voice rough from cold. "Why?" He looked at her finally. His eyes were gray, tired, kind and lonely. "I've been alone here too long," he said. "I saw the heat signature on my scanner, thought maybe it was a flare." He glanced at the child. "I didn't expect to find you too." She looked away. "I didn't expect to be found." The man reached into his pack and pulled out a thermal cube. He placed it closer to them, adding more heat to the cave. Kalira held her baby tighter as warmth spread around them. The child shifted and let out a soft cry. It sounded stronger. "Now, I'm Kalira," she said quietly. The man gave a small nod. "Jonas," he replied. "No titles, no ranks. No long stories, just a name." She liked that. The storm outside raged louder now. Wind shook the cave walls. Snow blew past the entrance. Jonas stood and checked a small device at his wrist, some kind of weather reader. "Can't leave until this clears," he muttered. "Could be hours, maybe days." Kalira didn't speak. She didn't want to think about leaving. Not yet. For now, she and her child were warm, safe, because of this stranger, this human. Jonas sat again and took a deep breath. He stared at the fire, not at her. He didn't ask questions about her species, her past, her child. He didn't look at her like she was something strange or dangerous. He just kept the fire burning. Kalira watched him silently. His hands were rough, scarred but steady. His eyes held something familiar, lost pain, but also hope. She felt her fear fade, just a little, that night. She didn't sleep from exhaustion. She stayed awake, holding her baby and listening to Jonas breathe. The cave was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in many moons, she didn't dream of death. She just stared at the flickering light and wondered if this man was real. By morning, her baby opened his eyes fully. He looked up at her, then at the fire, and smiled. A small smile, weak but real. Kalira's heart ached with emotion. She turned to Jonas and whispered, "Thank you." He looked up, surprised, then gave a small nod. He didn't smile, but something in his eyes softened. "Get strong," he said quietly. "We're not safe yet." Kalira didn't know what the future held. But in that moment, with the fire warming her skin and her child alive in her arms, she believed in something again. Maybe not safety, maybe not tomorrow, but this moment, this stranger's warmth was enough. The days that followed were quiet. Outside the cave, the snow kept falling, hiding everything in white silence. But inside, the stone walls warmed by flickering fire and soft breathing, Kalira and Jonas lived. They spoke little words. Didn't matter much here. The fire spoke, the wind whispered through cracks. And the baby's breathing was music. Jonas worked during the daylight hours. Had a broken scanner he was always trying to fix. Sometimes he melted snow for water. Sometimes he adjusted a signal device. Kalira didn't understand all the tools he used, but she watched him carefully, quietly. Her strength was slowly returning. She could walk again without falling. Her skin had color again, and her baby nursed more often. The warmth, the food, the pisset was saving them. She had expected fear, but instead, she felt stillness. Jonas was not like others she had met. No loud voice, no harsh questions. He didn't treat her like an enemy or a refugee. Simply let her be. She helped him in small ways. She cleaned his tools with careful fingers, cooked meals. Using his strange human rations, she folded the blanket every morning and sat beside him while he worked. It felt almost like a home. On the third night, the wind howled so hard it shook loose bits of snow from the ceiling. Jonas moved closer to the fire. Pulling his jacket around his chest, Kalira was already sitting with the baby asleep beside her. The flames danced between them, casting golden shadows on their faces. Jonas handed her a piece of dried food. She took it without a word. Their fingers brushed for just a second. Her hand pulled back fast. Surprised by the warmth of his skin, he didn't react, but her heart did. It beat louder in her ears. Why? She didn't understand. Kalira stared at him while he stared into the fire. She wondered, what pain did he carry? What had he lost? No one chooses to live alone in the cold unless they're running from something, Jonas, she said quietly. He looked at her. Why are you here? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small object to picture. He handed it to her. It showed a woman and a small boy, both smiling. They looked human, peaceful. Happy, Kalira stared at the picture, then back at Jonas. Your family? He nodded slowly. Gone. He said, that one word held too much. Too much to explain, too much to fix. Kalira didn't speak again. She only handed the photo back. Jonas placed it gently in his jacket and leaned back against the cave wall. He closed his eyes but didn't sleep. Neither did she that night. The silence between them changed. It wasn't cold or distant. It was soft, respectful. Two souls sitting by firelight, both broken in different ways, but still breathing, still. Trying the next morning, Kalira stepped out of the cave for the first time. Snow blinded her at first, but then her eyes adjusted. She saw a small clearing ahead. She turned back toward the cave where Jonas held her baby. Rocking him gently, a strange warmth filled her chest. She walked forward, just a few steps, and looked up at the sky. Clouds rolled above, heavy and gray, but there was light trying to break through. A pale golden light. It reminded her of her home before the war. When she returned, Jonas looked up, surprised. You walked, he said. Kalira smiled softly. My legs remembered. He chuckled once, a short, tired sound, but it was the first laugh she'd heard from him. She sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. The baby made a small cooing noise, and Jonas smiled down at the child. He's strong, Jonas said. He'll survive. Kalira nodded. Yes, because of you. He shook his head. No. Because of both of us. The fire crackled beside them. And though the world outside was frozen and cruel, inside the cave, three souls found peace. Not forever, not safe, but for now, they had fire, they had silence, and they had each other. Asterisk, the storm came without warning. One moment, the sky outside the cave was calm. The next, clouds rolled in like waves, black and heavy. Then came the howling wind, louder than before, strong enough to shake the rocks. Jonas stood at the entrance, his jaw tight. He checked the scanner on his wrist. But the screen blinked red. Signals gone. He said softly, more to himself than to Kalira. She held the baby close, her arms tense. What does it mean? She asked. Jonas didn't look at her. It means no help is coming. Snow blew into the cave. Thick and fast. He quickly pulled down a cover made from fabric and metal sheets to block the wind. The cave grew darker, but warmer. Kalira stayed by the fire with her baby, rocking him gently, but something was wrong. The baby wasn't making his usual soft sounds. He was breathing fast, and his skin was hot. Kalira touched his forehead and froze. No. No, please, she whispered. Jonas turned when he heard her voice. He knelt beside her and placed his hand on the baby's forehead. Then he opened his pack, searching quickly. This isn't good, he said, fever's high. He needs medicine. Medicine. Kalira's eyes filled with panic. We have nothing here, she said. Jonas didn't answer right away. He stood, pulled on his gear, and checked his belt. There's a med kit in my crashed pod. He said, About 6 clicks east of here. You can't go, Kalira said quickly. The storm will kill you if I don't go, he replied. The fever will kill him. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp-focused. He strapped on his oxygen mask and zipped his jacket up to his neck. Kalira grabbed his arm. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice shaking. Jonas looked at her, really looked at her. You and your child are the only living. Things I've seen in months, he said. I'm not letting him die then, without another word. He slipped out into the storm. The wind slammed the cave shut behind him. Kalira stared at the entrance, holding her baby tight. Hours passed. The fire burned low. The storm screamed outside. The baby whimpered in her arms. Body hot and weak, she sang softly, songs from her homeworld. She told him stories. Even though he couldn't understand, she begged him to fight, to stay, to survive. But inside, fear kept growing. What if Jonas didn't come back? What if the cold took him like it almost took her? She shook her head and rocked harder. No, she whispered. He promised. Suddenly a loud noise outside, something heavy hitting the cave door. Kalira jumped up, heart racing. Jonas. She cried. The metal sheet shifted, and a hand pushed through. Jonas stumbled in, covered in snow and ice, blood dripping from a gash on his leg. He fell to one knee, breath ragged, but in his hand he held a silver medical case. Kalira helped him inside, dragging the kit near the fire. His fingers were shaking, but he opened it and pulled out a syringe. He handed it to her. Right arm, he whispered. Give him half. Kalira did it fast, her hands steady despite her heart pounding within. Minutes. The baby's breathing slowed, his body relaxed, and his skin began to cool. Jonas collapsed beside the wall. Exhausted, his face pale, his eyes barely open. But he smiled when he saw the child sleeping peacefully. Told you I'd get it, he muttered. Kalira knelt beside him and wiped blood from his face. You're bleeding, she said. He shook his head slowly. Just a scratch. She touched his cheek gently. You saved him. Jonas looked at her, eyes soft. I couldn't let you lose him, he said. I know what that feels like. Kalira's heart ached. Not from fear, but from something new, something warm. Heavy and quiet, she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. You're not alone anymore, she whispered. The fire crackled softly. The storm still raged outside, but inside the cave. A mother and her baby were safe, because a stranger chose to fight the snow, to fight the cold, to fight for someone he barely knew. And somewhere in that quiet cave, under layers of fur and stone, a new bond had begun to form. One born not of words, but of fire, of survival, and of selfless warmth. 3 days passed since Jonas walked into the storm and returned, bleeding but alive. The baby's fever was gone, his cries strong again. The cave was quiet, peaceful, safe, too safe. Kalira stood at the entrance early one morning. She squinted at the pale snowfield beyond the rocks. It looked calm, untouched, but something felt wrong, a pressure in the air. A sound that wasn't there. She stepped outside carefully, wrapping her child close. Jonas was still inside. Fixing the broken scanner, she took a few more steps and stared at the far hills, and then she saw it, a flicker of red light. Faint, blinking in the distance, moving slowly, her breath caught in her throat. No. She turned and ran back inside Jonas. He looked up quickly, saw her face, and stood. What is it? Hunter drone, she said, voice tight. At least one. Maybe more. Jonas cursed softly under his breath. He grabbed his gear, pulled open a crate, and took out 2 weapons and old pulse rifle and a hand cannon. He tossed her the smaller one. You ever fire one of these? Kalira looked down at it, her fingers trembling. Not since the invasion. Good, Jonas said. Time to remember. They quickly set traps outside the cave tripwires. Signal mines, smoke grenades. Jonas showed her how to activate the defense grid from his belt. We hold them here, he said. If they find the cave, they'll burn everything. You, me. The baby, Kalira nodded, fierce determination growing inside her. She wouldn't run again, not now, not with Jonas, not with her child here. Snow began to fall again. Gentle at first, Then faster, thicker, the light outside dimmed, and with it, the air grew tense. Suddenly, a high-pitched hum cut through the silence. Jonas grabbed her hand and pulled her into cover behind the rocks. "They're scanning," he said. "Stay low." The hum passed over them like a wave. Kalira held her breath, clutching the child to her chest. Then a loud beep from Jonas's belt. "Contact," he said. They found something, a moment later. A silver drone floated into view, sleek, round, blinking red. It scanned the ground, then moved toward the cave. Jonas raised his rifle and fired once. A sharp blast lit the air. The drone exploded mid-air, but now they were seen. More shapes appeared from the snowy hills. 3 more drones. Maybe 4. Fast, armed, deadly. They darted through the storm like hunting birds. Kalira turned to Jonas. "We'll never outrun them." "We're not going to run," he replied. "Not anymore." The drones opened fire. Bolts of red energy sizzled through the snow. Kalira ducked behind a rock and returned fire, hitting one in the wing. It spiraled down and crashed into the ice. Jonas shot another from behind, but a third drone circled high, targeting the cave entrance. "No," Kalira shouted. She ran toward it, firing wildly, trying to distract it. The drone spun and aimed directly at her. Time slowed. A blast fired. She flinched, but nothing hit her. She opened her eyes. Jonas stood in front of her, breathing hard. He had blocked the shot. His left arm was burned, but he didn't fall. "You okay?" he asked through clenched teeth. She nodded, her chest tight. He pushed her gently behind a rock. "Protect the baby. I'll finish this." Jonas charged forward, gun blazing. One drone exploded in a ball of fire. The last tried to flee, but Kalira aimed, hands steady, and shot it down with a single clean blast. Silence returned. Smoke rose from the snow, black and twisting. The wind died down, and only the crackling fire in the cave could be heard. Jonas limped back to her side, his face bruised, his arm bleeding, but he smiled. "We're still here," he said. "We made it." Kalira dropped her weapon and rushed to him. She held him tight, tears in her eyes. "You jumped in front of me," she whispered. "You almost died." Jonas leaned his forehead against hers. "You and that baby are worth fighting for," he said. "Shh. I'm not losing anyone again." Kalira's chest ached, not from fear but from something deeper. She looked at him, really looked at him. This man, this human, had become more than a stranger, more than a savior. He had become her shelter in the storm, her shield, as the snow fell gently once again. She knew this fight wasn't over, but from now on, they would face the shadows together, not as strangers, but as something stronger. Something real. Night returned, and with it came silence. The drones were gone, their wreckage burning quietly in the snow outside the cave, but Jonas was hurt badly. His left side was scorched from the drone's energy blast, and blood had soaked through the thick bandages Kalira had wrapped around his shoulder. He lay against the wall, pale and shaking. Kalira sat beside him, holding a cloth to his forehead. Her child slept wrapped in furs nearby, breathing softly, but the cave no longer felt warm. The fire burned low, and so did her hope. "You need real medicine," she whispered. "You saved us." "Now I can't lose you, Jonas?" Gave her a weak smile. "You already saved me," he said. "Back when I had nothing left." Kalira shook her head, tears rising. "Don't talk like that. You're not done, Jonas. Not yet." He closed his eyes, breathing slow and heavy. Kalira turned to the fire, adding what little fuel remained. Flames rose, casting long shadows on the stone walls. She stared into them, her heart pounding. If Jonas died, she would be alone again. Alone with a baby in a broken cave, surrounded by snow and machines. She stood, pacing back and forth. Every second felt longer, every heartbeat louder. Then, a noise outside. Not wind, not snow, something heavier, something crawling. Kalira froze. Her ears twitched at the low, mechanical buzz. A survivor drone. Smaller, smarter, deadlier. She reached for Jonas's weapon, but he coughed behind her. "You can't fight like this," she said. You need to rest. Jonas opened his eyes. Barely. He tried to lift his hand, but it fell back down. I'll cover you, he whispered. Just don't let it take him, Kalira picked up the pulse rifle. Her hands shook for only a moment, then they went still. Steel filled her chest. She wasn't just a mother now. She wasn't just a survivor. She was the flame. She was the fire that would fight back. The drone crawled into Vuthan legs, red-eye sharp blades. It scanned the cave entrance, then darted inside, fast like lightning. Kalira moved quicker than she ever had before. She fired once, missed the drone, spun toward her blades. Flashing, she rolled to the side, slamming into a rock. The rifle clattered across the ground. The drone leaped. Kalira grabbed a burning log from the fire and swung it hard. The flames hit its eye. It screamed in sparks and smoke. Jonas tried to get up, groaning, but Kalira shouted, "Stay down. I've got this." She grabbed the fallen weapon, aimed it with steady hands. The drone charged again. She fired. Once, twice, 3 times. The shots ripped through its body. The drone exploded in a flash of metal and fire. Smoke filled the cave, but Kalira didn't cough, didn't flinch. She stood tall, the rifle still smoking in her hands. She looked at Jonas. He was watching her. Eyes wide, not with fear, but with something else. Amazement, respect. You really did it, he whispered. Kalira dropped the rifle and ran to his side. She checked his pulse still strong. She touched his face, her eyes shining. You're going to live, she said, and so am I. Jonas chuckled weakly. I think I'm starting to believe that. Kalira leaned closer. Their foreheads touched. There were no words, just warmth. Not from fire, but from each other. The child stirred and began to cry softly. Kalira moved to pick him up. He looked at her with wide, curious eyes, as if he understood something had changed, and it had. Kalira was no longer the frozen mother who had curled up in the snow to die. She had found strength in fire, in survival, in love. She had fought back, and she had won. Outside, the sky began to clear. The stars peeked through the clouds. Snow still fell, but gently now, like feathers from above. Inside the cave, a woman, a man, and a child sat close together, safe for one more night, stronger than before, and ready for whatever came next. Morning came slowly, for the first time in weeks. The sky outside the cave wasn't dark or angry. The storm had passed, the clouds opened, and soft golden light fell on the snow like a gift. Kalira stepped outside, holding her baby close. She blinked against the sunlight. Tit was warm, real, gentle. She hadn't seen sunlight since before the invasion. She closed her eyes, let it touch her face, and breathed deeply. It smelled like peace, like change. Behind her, Jonas sat at the mouth of the cave, one hand resting on his bandaged arm. He looked better, still pale, still tired, but better. His strength was coming back, slowly but surely. The fire inside him hadn't gone out. You should be resting, Kalira said gently as she turned to face him. Jonas smiled, weak but real. Hard to rest when the sun finally shows up. He looked out at the open sky. I forgot what color the world used to have. Kalira sat beside him, laying the baby in a nest of soft fur. She watched the child stretch his arms and blink at the light. He had survived the cold, the fever, the drones. He was a miracle. So was Jonas. So what now? Jonas asked after a long pause. We just live in a cave forever? Kalira shook her head slowly. No, she said. I think it's time to leave the cave. Jonas raised an eyebrow. With no ship, no fuel, and no idea where the next safe place is? She looked at him, a small smirk on her lips. We made it this far? That means something, before he could answer. A loud beep echoed from his broken scanner. Jonas's eyes widened. He pulled the device close and stared at the screen. A green blinking light, a rescue signal, active, strong and close. How? He whispered. I thought the beacon was fried. Kalira leaned over his shoulder. You fixed it, she said. Maybe you just didn't know you did. Jonas stood slowly, eyes never leaving the scanner. It's moving. Getting closer, Within minutes, a shadow moved across the snow above them. A rescue shuttle, low and silent, drifted through the sky like a bird. Then it landed softly on a nearby ridge. The hatch opened, and two armored figures stepped out. Waving, Jonas looked at Kellerah, unsure. She looked down at her baby, then back at him. "I never thought I'd see help again," she whispered. "Not after everything." He nodded. "Me neither," then added, "You don't have to go if you don't want to. I mean, you and the little one, there's always a choice." Kalira didn't speak right away. She looked at the ship, the strangers, the rising sun. Then she looked at Jonas. This man who had given everything for her and her child, food, warmth, his own body in battle. She reached down and took his hand. "No," she said. "There's no choice for me anymore. Where you go, we go." Jonas blinked, surprised. "You sure?" Kalira smiled. "For the first time, I am." He picked up the few supplies they had left. She cradled the baby, and together they stepped out of the cave. Leaving behind the shadows and cold as they walked toward the rescue team, the sun grew. Brighter behind them, each step forward felt lighter. Not just survival anymore, but life. The soldier at the shuttle looked at Kalira and the child and said, "You're not human, are you?" Kalira stood tall. "No," she said calmly. "But he is." She looked at Jonas. "And so is the man who saved us." The soldier paused, then nodded and stepped aside. "Welcome aboard." As the hatch closed behind them and the ship lifted into the sky, Kalira looked down at the snowy world. The cave disappeared below, the place where death was waiting but life had bloomed instead. She turned to Jonas. "I once closed my eyes, waiting to die," she said. "And then you came, Jonas. Reached out, touched the baby's tiny hand, and now?" he asked. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Now we begin." And as the stars opened ahead of them, shining bright and endless, their story truly began, not of war, not of fear, but of survival, hope, and a love born in the cold.